After a few series wins, Atlanta Braves fans are optimistic again and thinking the Braves could be buyers at the trade deadline. If that is the case, who are some of their top targets? I'll answer that question and more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at Locked On_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below so more can find us, and hit that subscribe button as we're approaching 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on the audio version, you can help out as well by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Thank you so much for all the support and kind words that you give me in the comment section. It does mean a lot, and appreciate my everydayers out there as well. Today's episode is going to be a bit of an abbreviated mailbag episode, as I'm going to be out the rest of this week. So we'll answer a lot of trade questions. Everybody's feeling optimistic once again after winning back-to-back series, getting the big win over the Mets on Monday night. Everybody's wondering now, are the Braves going to be buyers? So we'll ride that optimistic wave and talk about who the Braves could target at the deadline and get into the rest of your questions on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Let's jump into the first question. Don't have a lot to get to on today's episode, as again, I know this isn't generally when we do the Mailbag podcast, but doing it a bit early this week as I will be out for the rest of the week. Lindsay's going to have you covered, though, over on the postcast for the rest of this Mets series and through the weekend. First one comes from Eddie, who says, with Ozzy's struggles, should Nacho get a legit look at second base, even if just to give Ozzy a breather? Here's been my issue with Ozzy and what to do about Ozzy for quite a while now. And I had this conversation offline with Lindsay after we finished recording. I believe it was Tuesday night's game. We were talking about Ozzy, and I'm looking at that lineup, and I'm seeing a 615 OPS for Ozzy, a 600 OPS for Michael Harris, and those two guys are just killing us. And look, we put a lot of emphasis on those guys at the top, and for good reason. Those guys need to be doing more damage, especially when they get chances. But what made the lineup so special was the length of it, and not just Okuda, Olsen, Riley, Ozuna. It was the guys behind them like Ozzy and Michael Harris that really made this lineup special and made it so deep. But now you're looking at a bottom of the order that has, Nick Allen, Michael Harris, Ozzy, all with, under 650 OPSs. And how long can you really sustain that lack of production, even from the bottom of your order? And even despite the great defense that you get from Nick Allen and Michael Harris in particular. But the issue that I've always had with replacing Ozzy Albies is not just that you're replacing Ozzy Albies, who has a 615 OPS. You're replacing one of your leaders. And what was one of the other podcasts we had this week? We talked a lot about leadership, and Ozzy is one of those guys. As somebody pointed out in the comment section on that episode, there was a time in the past where Ozuna didn't run out of play, and it was Ozzy who got onto him about it. So Ozzy's not only that guy that keeps the clubhouse loose, a guy that everybody loves to be around. He also will step up and say some things when he needs to. So look, at the end of the day, you need guys who are going to perform. And who knows if Nacho is a better offensive talent right now, even than what Ozzy Albies is giving you. We don't know. I mean, the small glimpses we've had of Nacho at the major league level, it wasn't great. Could Nacho eventually be the replacement for Ozzy down the road? Yeah, I think there's a possibility. Keep in mind that during Nacho's rehab assignment, he's been primarily playing or completely playing at third base. And so I would think if they were trying to groom him to, replace Ozzy or give him a chance at second base, that we would have seen him there. If you do start seeing him play some there at Gwinnett, then I think that would give you some sort of indication. And like I said, at the end of the day, even more than leaders, and that's what I tried to make clear on the podcast the other day, is I was going on a rant about maybe this leadership group isn't the best. that is just an excuse that we're all using to try to figure out why this team isn't performing. But the bigger issue is they're not performing because guys like Ozzie, like Michael Harris, and even some of the big guys at the top aren't performing to the level that we thought they would and like they have in the past. And some of the offline talk that I had with Lindsay too, I mentioned the fact that Ozzie's whole game for the most part has been generated around slugging. And I know he doesn't look like it as a smaller guy, but what has always made Ozzie so good is his slugging, his ability to hit 25, 30 home runs. But now with baseballs having more drag on them, we got a question about that later too. And you're seeing, and that's why I think you've seen in this kind of up and down seasons for Ozzie. Part of it is injuries, but it's also the seasons where he hasn't performed as well are the seasons where home runs were down across the league and where seemingly the baseballs weren't traveling quite as far. And now it seems like we're sticking with that type of baseball for 2 years in a row. And if, again, I'll talk about this more in a minute, but if that's going to be what it is, that's fine. Just stop messing with them. But if that is going to be the case, then it really does take away from what has made Ozzie so good in the past, because you look at Ozzie's metrics, even in his good years in the past, and it still was a high chase rate, still a low walk rate, still a low hard hit rate, everything kind of below average, but he's always made up for it by slugging and having a big slugging percentage. But that's not the case right now. He's not getting those home runs. And when he's not getting those home runs with the rest of his profile, it makes him a bad hitter. I mean, sorry to say, it just does. It makes him a bad hitter when he can't rely and depend on the one thing that has made him such a valuable player in the past. And it is that slug. And so with that taken away from him, I just don't know who Ozzie Albies is as a hitter. So yeah, if it does continue like this, I think the Braves have to try something. But I think he's going to get more of a leash than some just because of what he means to the team off the field as well. Right or wrong, I think that'll be the case. And next one from Dustin Mounts that says, Braves are 6.5 games out of a wild card spot. What record for these 13 straight games, including last night, would you think put the Braves in buy mode or in sell mode? So I don't know that these next 13 games, obviously they're going to play a part of it. I said this in a podcast last week that I think the goal should be to get as close to 500 as possible by the All-Star break. That should be the goal and the mission for this Atlanta Braves team, is to get, either a game under, game over by the All-Star break. And if you can do that, you put yourself in a good position, because the schedule does ease up in the second half of the year. And even the schedule going into the All-Star break at the beginning of July is somewhat favorable. So I think that is the goal. I've always maintained that if you're more than 5 games out come the trade deadline, that you should at least do some sort of a soft sale, if not just completely sell off. So that's always been the barrier for me, is if you're more than 5 games back going into the trade deadline. So, whatever that looks like in these next 13 games, for me, it's ultimately, what do you look like once you get to the trade deadline? If you're more than 5 games out, I think you need to at least do some sort of soft sale. So that's where I would put it. But over these next 13 games, you're playing the Mets 7 times, you're playing the Phillies 3 times. Again, I think the goal has to be, no matter what happens in those games, that by the All-Star break, you're, game under, game over, 2 games under 500, somewhere in that range. I would feel pretty comfortable with the Braves being buyers going into the deadline. All right, we got a lot more questions to get to, several on the trade deadline and who the Braves could be targeting. We'll get into those questions here next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. Getting ready to go on a big trip right now. I've already packed some of my no-shell Wonderful Pistachios for the trip. I had one on the shelf behind me, but I ate it yesterday and didn't get it replaced. But I'll make sure that we have some on the trip for myself and the kids, who they love them as well. But if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. Whether you're running between meetings, going on vacations, dropping kids off on the regular like myself, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. They're going to get you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. A lot of them talking about the big win by the Braves on Tuesday night. Just so many great plays in that game. You want to go back and listen to mine and Lindsay's thoughts on it. You got the postcast or my take on it as well on our last episode of Locked On Braves. You might notice something in the side panel board there on, if you're watching on YouTube, that I had kind of pre-recorded in the 8th inning and had to change things and go back and record the first segment of that one, trying to work ahead as getting ready for vacation. So let me know if you caught that mishap on the YouTube version in our last episode. But again, make sure you go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB as well. This will be our last podcast for the week. And again, I'm pre-recording this on Wednesday morning to come out on Thursday morning. So if some things change, if the Braves make a huge trade between now and then, I apologize for that, but I'll be back on Monday. All right, next question comes from Nicholas Simonik. It says, are there any shortstop prospects you would like to see the Braves targeting at the deadline if they soft sell? I mean, if you soft sell, I just don't know. I don't know who you're trading that's going to bring back the type of shortstop prospect that you want. And here's the thing too, great shortstops don't just grow on trees. There are not a lot available, and it's not something that teams usually give up. Trey Turner's one example, Fernando Tatis Jr. another, but they were both really young. Trey Turner had just got drafted. Fernando Tatis was really young. You don't really see top shortstop prospects get traded all that much because they're just so valuable. But a couple of names that I look at, and I don't know the Diamondbacks are going to be buyers of the deadline either, but Jordan Lawler's one that I've mentioned a lot. You go up to Seattle, who I think could be buyers of the deadline if they were willing to trade, Colt Emerson. Again, that'd be a pretty high price. He's their top prospect. I don't really know who you're trading in a soft sell to get that done. I doubt the Cardinals would be willing to trade with J.J. Weatherholt. And again, what are you giving up for that? He's their top prospect. I doubt you're going to get Carson Williams from the Rays. So I just don't know that there's too much out there prospect-wise that the Braves could go and get. Arjun Namala of the Blue Jays, who might be in it. Again, that's their top prospect. I mean, a good shortstop's going to be a team's best prospect, and it's going to cost you a lot to go out and get a team's top prospect like that. So, Leo DeVries, the Padres, he's their top prospect. It's just not something you generally see, teams be willing to give up like that if you have a top prospect. So I don't see a lot that the Braves could go after, like, even Cooper Pratt of the Brewers, somebody that I really like. The Brewers are in it, but it's going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you more than Ozuna. It's going to cost you more than Iglesias. So you're not talking about just trading off your rentals for a top shortstop prospect. It's going to cost you a lot if you're going to try and pull something like that off. So I don't see it. One name that I was, thinking about is Edwin Arroyo of the Reds. If the Reds, go in, they're over 500 right now. So they're in the race. If they were willing to trade Edwin Arroyo, who I believe can stick at shortstop and has the glove for it, maybe just some questions about the bat and his injury history, I think that might be the best or the most possible, top shortstop prospect out there that the Braves could get. It's just Marcelo Meyer of the Red Sox. They're using him right now, and it's going to cost you a lot to get him. It's just what it would take to get a top shortstop prospect. I don't think the Braves have, and most teams aren't really willing to give that up. So I think it's unlikely that you find that top prospect shortstop, especially if you're just doing a soft sale. And even if you're doing a big sale, if you're going all in, you're going to trade Hurston Waldrop and Marcelo Zuna for Edwin Arroyo. I mean, that could work. I think that could be okay, but that's what you're looking at doing. Ben Ginsburg says, with Grant Holmes on track to shatter his career innings total, do you think the Braves should prioritize adding a starter at the deadline and then move Holmes into the bullpen in August, September? He's proven his ability in high leverage settings and can go multiple innings. This would allow the Braves to keep him active the rest of the year as opposed to potentially having to shut him down, and could push someone like Aaron Bummer up in the pecking order in the bullpen. This scenario assumes the Braves will buy on some level at the deadline. So, I mean, I do think the Braves are going to have to monitor Grant Holmes a little bit at some point. He also just kind of feels like that guy that you just kind of push out there and let him go. I mean, it's not like he's a young buck at this point. He's 29 years old, but you certainly don't want to wear him out. You saw what happened with Ronaldo Lopez going from reliever to starter last year. Not only did he have to sit on the IL this year, but now he's big injury and out for most, if not all, of this season. And by the way, Ronaldo Lopez is a guy I think that could come back and serve a spot in the bullpen at the end of the year. But you look at Grant Holmes, he threw 79 in the third inning, he threw 68 in the third innings last year at the big league level. He's already thrown 79 in the third innings at the big league level this year. But last year at the minor league level too, he threw 41 innings. So, I mean, you're looking, I think I've said before, I think you get 150 innings out of Grant Holmes is probably the max you're looking to do for him. To answer the question, though, I do think they need to target starting pitching at the deadline if they are buyers, not just for the sole reason of, needing to limit Grant Holmes and maybe move him back to the bullpen, which I think could happen and certainly is a possibility, but just because I think you need that depth of pitching. Jake Booger_Red says, which prospect would have the greatest return in a trade? And that is a good question right now because AJ Smith-Shawver, Drake Baldwin graduated. They're no longer prospects. Who is the Braves' top prospect? Hurston Waldrop's had his ups and downs this year. He's making some mechanical changes, so maybe he's getting back up into that top prospect category. Didier Fuentes is certainly on the rise now at AAA. J.R. Ritchie on the rise as well. Been one of my favorite, prospects for the Braves for quite some time. I just don't know who outside of that is really a huge ticket. Obviously you have the Jose Perdomos and Diego Torrens that are young and have the big upside, but are certainly unproven at this point. I don't know who the big ticket item is prospect wise for the Atlanta Braves. Maybe Cam Caminiti, again, who is young, big pick from last year. I would have guessed it goes, Cam Caminiti, Hurston Waldrop, Didier Fuentes, J.R. Ritchie, Jose Perdomo, and Diego Torrens are probably, those are probably your top 6 prospects in the system right now, at least in terms of upside, and the prospects that would likely bring you the most in a trade. Caden Hurd, if we are back in it, who is one long-term guy, 2+ years, and one rental you would want at the deadline? So I didn't put too much research into this. Again, I'm getting trying to prepare to go on vacation here, but I think you go to the Pirates for all of this to fill the needs that you have. You go and get Dennis Santana, who is one of the better relievers in baseball right now and certainly help you and is under control for a couple more years. And you go and get Andrew Heaney, who has had a good first half, not expecting that from him, but a veteran starting pitcher that I think you can count on to give you a solid 5-6 innings every time out. So I think you can get this done just by going to the Pirates and getting those 2 guys. I mean, if it's not Santana, maybe Bednar, who I think might be in the last year of his deal under arbitration, so he wouldn't fit that long-term category. But Dennis Santana is probably going to be a very hot name at the deadline. It might cost you a good bit because of the season he's having. But, those were the first 2 guys that I kind of thought of that the Braves could go after. Another one from Caden who says, if we are buying at the deadline, how much money do we have to spend? So another good question, because we had the report, which we talked about yesterday, of the Braves being at least interested in Rafael Devers and what that could mean for the Braves spending wise going forward. But even in that deal, if the rumored deal was true that you'd be trading back Murphy and Ozuna in that really would have offset the money for this year. So it wouldn't have affected the payroll too much if you were to do that. Playing under the assumption that they still want to be under the luxury tax, which is set for $241 million this year. FanGraphs currently has the Braves luxury tax payroll at $228 million. So you're talking about, 10 to 12 million that you could play with at the trade deadline. So not a whole lot in order to stay under the tax, but that's also assuming that you're not moving any money out. Like if you were to make a trade and you move Sean Murphy in the deal, that could maybe open up the Braves for more money to be able to spend. But I would guess there's probably around 10 to 12 million left for the Braves to spend at the deadline. All right, we got several more questions to get to on today's episode. Some more about some pitching targets and also Jurickson Profar and what it means for him returning. We'll get into all of that here next. The NBA Finals are almost over, and you can catch all the action every single night. Highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You can look at and track their trends to make a wise investment, or you can combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds. Oklahoma City was the favorite coming into it, and looks like after falling behind, they are going to come back and win the series. I believe the final for that is on Thursday night with Oklahoma City up 3-2. You can go there and bet on the MVP favorite, finals winners, all of that at FanDuel.com. You can also check out World Series odds, award winner odds for Major League Baseball, again, right there at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. All right, so just a few more questions to get to on today's podcast. A couple of them from Please Come Back Offense, who says, with Jurickson Profar not being eligible for the postseason, is it a possibility that if the Braves end up being in the race towards the deadline, would he be a good trade piece or would he stay put? Love the show. Thank you so much for the kind words there. I just don't think he's tradable this season. Even if he comes back and sets the world on fire, I don't know how many teams are going to buy that, in a month sample size. And also, why would the Braves trade that? If he comes back and performs, why would the Braves trade that when you've got such little production out of your left fielders this year? Even if he's not going to be eligible for the postseason, I think you have to have him on the team just to try to help you get to the postseason. And then maybe you look in the offseason at dealing him, if you think you need to. It's just hard for me to see him coming back, playing so well that his value is so high that people overlook the fact that he was just suspended 80 games for PEDs, that a team would be willing to take on the rest of that contract and the risk that he's actually the player that the Braves thought he was going to be, and the player that he was in 2024. It's just hard for me to see that happening. And like I said, even if he does come back and he plays to that level, I have a hard time believing the Braves are going to trade somebody that's actually helping them offensively. So again, I get the worry, but we're just trying to get to the postseason right now. We'll worry about who plays left field once we actually get there. I just don't see Jurickson Profar getting moved this season or during this season. Maybe in the offseason, we'll see. Another one from Please Come Back Offense says, second question, who are some key relief pitchers or starting pitchers or shortstops the Braves would ask about at the trade deadline? So I talked about Dennis Santana, Andrew Heaney from the Pirates, I think are two obvious names, going to be names that are talked about a lot, which means they're names the Braves probably aren't going to trade for. Bo Bichette, though, the Blue Jays are in it right now. I think last time I looked, they were actually second in the AL East. So maybe they're not going to be sellers at the deadline. They're actually third in the AL East now. They're 39 and 33. So they might be buyers at the deadline, but Bo Bichette is obviously the one rental shortstop out there that everybody's talked about. The Blue Jays, are up a couple of games on a wild card spot. If they were to fall out of it, though, and become sellers, or even if they're just thinking about standing pat, but maybe they wanted to try to get something for Bo Bichette and before they risk losing him to free agency, I still think there could be that scenario. That would be the one shortstop you could go after. I know his defense is bad. Even his offense hasn't been quite as good as I would have hoped this year. But I think it'd be a clear upgrade offensively over Nick Allen, who you could still keep and put in as a defensive replacement at the end of games or something like that. So that'd be the one shortstop I think you could look at. Pitchers out there, Zach Littell from the Rays, another one. But again, the Rays are in it. But I do like Zach Littell. Tyler Anderson from the Angels, I know, is another another name that out there, a veteran pitcher, nothing that's really going to excite you. And as I've said multiple times, and as I said in the offseason, I don't need a top of the rotation pitcher. That would be nice. I just need somebody to help us get through the regular season, somebody that's going to give you quality innings. That's really all that I'm looking for from the Braves in terms of starting pitcher. Aaron Apton says, the Braves have had many possible turning points this season. Do you think this first Mets game could finally be the actual one? Yes, if they follow it up with a big win on Wednesday. And I know I'm recording this Wednesday morning and it's coming out on Thursday, so you'll know at the point that this comes out. But if they have that big momentum game on Tuesday, win that, and then you drop an egg the next two games in this series when you got Sale going up against Paul Blackburn, and then you got Spencer Strider going in the finale. It's similar to me to the series in Toronto way back where the Braves were kind of getting on a roll. You won the first game of that series, and then you lay an egg in those last two, and it killed all momentum. So momentum's only good until your next game in baseball, and you play every day. Momentum can change very quickly. But if you parlay that, check us out over at FanDuel. If you parlay that into a win on Wednesday with your ace on the mound, and you go ahead and wrap up that series and look for a sweep on Thursday, and I think at that point, whether you get the sweep or not isn't as significant. But again, you come back out and you lay an egg on Wednesday with your ace on the mound that you pushed back for this series, and then you ultimately lose the series overall, then that turning point's not there. So again, it could be a turning point, but we don't really know that until we see the results of the next week or so. If this leads into some momentum for them, some confidence for them going forward. But yeah, it definitely has the potential to be a big turning point in the season for the Atlanta Braves. Joshua Daniels says there was whispers the Braves and AA checked in on Devers, even if it was just posturing. Does that mean does that mean a not so big superstar is on the way? Sorry, stumbled over the end of that question there. We talked about this a little bit on yesterday's podcast. I don't even know what day it is at this point, but I guess Wednesday morning's podcast, that it does give me hope that even if they were just posturing, as Josh said, even if it was just interest, checking in, that it means that AA is willing to make that big, desperate move to try to shake things up and turn this team around. And again, whether that happens during the season or in the off season, it gives me hope that AA is willing to, spend big in money and prospects to try to shake this team up and bring in somebody huge to help them turn things around. So I do think, even if it was just saying, hey, can we take advantage of a team that wants to get rid of a superstar because they're clashing, and it was just trying to take advantage of the situation, which is what I think it ultimately was, it still tells me there's some willingness there from AA to make a big splash to shake things up and turn things around. And if this season goes the way that it's been going and this team doesn't make the postseason, there needs to be some big splashes in the offseason. Again, I think managerial change is going to be one of them, but also just shaking up the roster, whether that means removing some of the players on it or just bringing in a big name to help kind of rejuvenate these guys in the lineup. So it does give me some hope, even just knowing that there was interest there in Devers. Last one here from Miller, who says, what do you think of the tweet that Andrew McCutchen sent about the baseballs being different? Do you think we can just hope that they change back so the Braves can hit more home runs again, or do what can the Braves of the balls just aren't flying anymore? Again, I'm struggling over some of these questions. I apologize. I did not see the tweet from Andrew McCutchen, but I did see a tweet from somebody out there. I don't know if it was Eno Saris, but somebody in that realm who talked about the drag on the baseballs this year and that we are seeing more drag on the baseballs again this season. And look, that can't be the complete excuse for the Atlanta Braves' lack of home runs and lack of offense. Everybody is dealing with that unless you are a conspiracy theorist and you think that the Dodgers are getting certain baseballs, the Dodgers and Yankees are getting certain baseballs that the Braves and other teams aren't getting. I tend to think the best of everyone and that that's not actually the case and that everybody's getting these baseballs with more drag on them. I'm fine if that's going to be what it is going forward. Just please stop tampering with. We've had these up and down years of low offense, high offense, low offense, high offense. Now we're seem to be having back-to-back years of, it's kind of the same, and less home runs. And if that's the game that baseball wants, I'm all for that. I'm all for making it less home run dependent and making it more an actual game that you have to play, and you play the game, and there are more hit and runs, and you're working on the athleticism in the game. You're working on the skills in the game of putting the ball in play. Again, old school part of me, that is fine. It's unfortunate as a Braves fan because this Braves team has been built around slug and not necessarily guys who put the ball in play and do the little things. But as a baseball fan, I'm fine if that's the direction that they want this game to go, to make it more action oriented on the field and not so much just home run dependent. But that does hurt the Braves because that's what this lineup and this team was built to do. And that's why I've been harping for years. They need to find other ways to try to score. But certainly it does seem like the baseballs have more drag on them. They're not traveling as much as they were in 2023 or 2021 or 2019. Again, it's been this up and down, kind of roller coaster that we've had with the baseballs and them not traveling as far some years and traveling more others. Just settle on one thing and keep it at that is all that I ask. So again, I don't think you can sit here as a Braves fan and hope that the baseballs are just going to magically go back to the 2023, 2021, 2019 type of levels. You gotta find ways to deal with what the game is. And again, hopefully that is the game that we have and it's going to stay that way, but the Braves are going to have to adjust to it no matter what. Thank you so much for all the great questions, sending those in. I really do appreciate it. Thanks so much for your support of Locked On Braves. Make sure you follow us on social media at LockedOn_Braves on X, Locked On Braves on Instagram. Again, I'll be out the rest of this week. Lindsay will have you with the postcast. I'll be back next Monday on the postcast and for your next episode of Locked On Braves. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube. Leave me a comment. Hit that thumbs up button, all the good things. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next.